Welcome to the Teens Behind the Scenes Webinar Series. My name is Leayne Dempsey. Teens Behind the Scenes is a program of the National Theater Foundation dedicated to providing teens in the Washington, D.C. area with access to Broadway touring productions and professional insight into performing arts careers. So in this series, we interview theater professionals to learn more about what they do, how they do it, and how they got to where they are now. So joining me today is Boddie. Welcome, Ro.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Leanne.
You're welcome. I'm going to read Ro's bio, everyone, and then we're just going to jump into a wonderful conversation. So Ro is thrilled to be part of this webinar series. He is an actor, educator, director, and currently the resident artist and sits on the board at Roundhouse Theater in Bethesda, Maryland. Since graduating from the University of North Carolina School of the Arts in 2009, Ro has had a steady career on stage as well as television. He has worked at off-Broadway theaters such as the Public and Classical Theater of Harlem, as well as regional theaters. His most recent DMV credits include Topdog, Underdog, the Mountaintop and Radio Golf at Roundhouse Theater, and Tempestuous elements at Arena Stage. Some of his television credits include Godfather of Harlem, Run the World, and The Good Wife. Ro has been an acting teacher at Middlebury College and American University and currently works as a professional presence consultant at Ovation Communication. Welcome, Ro. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. I'm so happy to be here. I'm happy to be in the AC and
Yes.
and to have some conversation about the work.
Yeah, it's definitely hot today. Yes. So I mean, we're excited. I'm excited to speak with you today because, you know, you're really giving us some insight into the acting track. Also, you're a professor, so that gives us also some, you know, the academia world as well. But I love to open up our conversation, Ro, for our listeners and our viewers, just talking a little bit about, you know, where we began. And since most of our listeners are teens, I like to ask, you know, who were you? Who was Ro the teenager? I know.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, what did I sign myself up for? No. But talk to us a little bit. Ro the teenager, were you already an artist? Were you already someone who knew that they wanted to be a performer, or did you discover that in high school?
You know, if you ask my family, they would say that I'm always performing, you know, because I'm always in the living room performing Michael Jackson and doing like age 5 and age 6 and trying to be the center of attention. But it wasn't until like my junior year of high school at Northern Nash where I didn't fill out my electives. And so my guidance counselor did it for me. And she put me in a drama class, and I had no idea. Yeah, I had no idea what a drama class was. I walked in there, and it was predominantly white students wearing all black and mascara, and like I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But we started doing improv, and we all got up on stage, and we started doing warm-ups and getting in our bodies. And you know, I come from a very conservative, like sports family. Like it was all weird, but I've always been an open-minded child. So I was like, I'm gonna embrace this. I'm gonna embrace it, you know. And it wasn't, I remember the moment, it wasn't until we had to do this monologue exercise where we had to write a monologue. And it was semi-autobiographical, but we had to change a couple of things to make it a story, make it fictional, and make sort of a character out of it. And it was the first time I'd done that, and I remember doing it. And I just remember the reaction from my peers, the reaction from my teacher, and the look of adoration and affirmation that I was doing something good. And you know, I'd say up until that point, I'd been okay at things, like mediocre, but you could feel when someone is giving you something where, oh, that was special. No, you don't understand. That was special. And it kind of bit me in that moment. And so I stayed in the class. I soaked up everything, you know, that I could from that class. And a former student of the school came to visit when I was doing South Pacific, the musical. I had no idea playing the role that I was playing. I was like a meal to back. I couldn't speak French or I was the only one that could sing. So that's why they had me in that role. And he came to visit. rehearsal. His name's EJ Cantu, and he went to NCSA in the high school program. And he was visiting, and he told my mom about it, who also happened to be visiting rehearsal that day, and said I had to audition, and it was free. And that's all my mom had to hear, is that it was free for people in state. And so I decided to give it a shot, and then I got into NCSA, and I graduated from high school at North Carolina School of the Arts, and then went
and North Carolina School of the Arts, that was your post high school, or was it the high school program that you did?
That was still high school. So during the grade year, they only for drama students, dancers, they can go all 4 years, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. But just your senior year, you can go and you graduate with a high school diploma from one of the top conservatories in the nation. Yeah. So that was kind of my entryway into the arts, into my alma mater, because I ended up going to that college. And when I figured out that this is what I wanted to do.
Wow. And then, so being an undergrad, being at UNCSA, after, were there anything, was it, when you started, you were like, I didn't even really know what a drama class was, right? Now you're going to school for this thing. And I'm assuming it was a BFA acting program that you went into. And then at college, what did you feel was the most significant thing about going to school for acting? Because technically you don't have to go to school for it, but what did you find the value in pursuing that at the collegiate level?
For me, the things that I learned the most was the importance of craft. Because I had talent, that's what got me there in the first place, but talent will only take you so far. And, I tried to buck the system a little bit at times because they were trying to make me be analytical in a way about things. And I was trying to fight against that, because I was like, I know it. Like, I remember my third year of college, my dean, I was doing a scene, and up until that point, nobody had called me out on anything. I was straight A's, and people were like, "Oh, he's so talented," pinching my cheeks and stuff. And like I went up and I did this scene, and the dean was like, "What are you doing?" After I said like my first line, he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm asking her something." I forget, or it could have been him, and he was like, "No, but what are you doing? What are you doing?" He was trying to get me to identify what the actions were.
Yes. Yeah.
But I knew what the action was. And I remember sitting down, feeling defeated and all of that. But it was a valuable lesson because a peer of mine said, "Ro, you're an instinctual actor, but he's trying to get you to craft in a way that when your instincts aren't there, you still know what the demands." And I was like, "Oh, okay, got it. Because you don't feel up to it every day, and when you go to do shows and do scenes and stuff. But if you know what your actions are and what the arc of the scene is and what your givens are and all of that, if you've crafted that, you just go right on into it,
It makes me think about I had met when I was in high school, I'd had a wonderful hoofing tap teacher, my first Black male tap teacher. And he would say in class, "Let me tell you the difference between an amateur and a professional." And he said, "An amateur can be great on any day." And he said, "But a professional is great every day." And the difference between that is the technique and the craft. So I think we should dive a little bit into how would you do, because you said you have talent and craft. And I think this is really important for those listening in, the young people listening into, what is craft, Ro? Like, what do you mean when you say craft?
Craft is the fundamentals, like we were taught Stanislavski-based techniques, which is psychorealism, and he brought that into existence back in Russia. And before then, everybody was presenting everything they were doing to everybody, instead of being real, rounded human beings. So to bring life to stage, and so it's all based off of that, everything that we were trained in. So when I think about craft, I think about you take a text, you look at what the given circumstances of the scenes are, and basically what the scene is telling you. And then you think about what your objective is when you're entering scenes. Why did you come into the room in the first place? Otherwise, you wouldn't have come in. So there's a need. And then how do you go about getting those things? And they all have to be actionable words. Tactics is another way of saying it. And then there's something in the way of you getting it. And that's where the conflict is at, And so every scene, no matter what you're doing, I don't care if it's Les Mis to Topdog, Underdog, fundamentals are there. And having that's what I mean when I say about craft, is having those fundamentals. And then there's other techniques as well. Like we learn comedy techniques, which really come in handy when you know that you need to lift the important words and lift the last word out to the audience so they get the joke, or turn out, on this line so that they, but you make it look like a dancer. You don't show them the technique. You just effortless in your actions. So we learned that, and we learned mass work. Which I really love mass work. Oh, I miss it. I mean, if there's anything I missed about being in a college, it's that type of stuff, mass work and combat work. Because you can't really just go down. There's no studio down the street that's gonna give me like a sword and stuff. We can. So I miss those two aspects of the institution the most. That's what I mean when I mean about craft, because the lines are pretty, in the script. It's great poetry. You know what I mean? But craft really brings it alive. And it really gives you a trajectory, so you don't feel like you're out on stage or on film floating and winging it. You have it, all of the stuff there, all of the fundamentals and technique there, and then you can forget about it, but it's there.
Yes.
So yeah.
I mean, it's the art. It's the art of the thing. That's so. I mean, it's so exciting, and it's exciting for our listeners to hear all of the different areas of acting as well, and different training. You just mentioned Stanislavski and psychorealism, but you also mentioned, mask work and comedy work. I mean, there's so much that an actor is building in regards to their skills. Would you say that they're Shakespeare, classical work, iambic pentameter, like we could keep going, and we could argue that August Wilson is a Shakespeare in his own, or August Wilson is August Wilson, right? In
the bar,
in his own,
No, he is.
So that's absolutely amazing, and I know you have experience in all of these. So, are there specific skills that you feel like even young people right now should be honing to help them be actors? Is there something that you would say, if you want to be an actor, this is what I want you to work on? And there may be some practical ones. And then if there's any other ones, any thoughts that you have on that?
I think the main thing that I always think about is honor the text. I'm such a purist when it comes to it. And sometimes I frustrate myself because with it, and sometimes the people I'm working with, because I can hear when, it's like music. When you're playing music and somebody hits a flat when they're supposed to hit another note, and your ear goes, like that's how I am with text. And so it's crucial, because that's your blueprint, like that's your lifeline to everything. And so honor the text. And what I mean by honor the text is know your lines. And that's a technical thing, and I know it just seems obvious, but you have no idea how many people think that that's the last thing that's important, and their performance should come in front of that. And so finding ways early on to train that muscle for you, because it is a muscle, because not everybody can do it very quickly. So figuring out for yourself what you need to get you to the place where you feel like you can be word perfect and forget about the line, so you can get up and play with people as early as possible in any process. And the other thing is to start to figure out, and this is not a technical thing, but it's an important thing, who you are and what kind of stories you want to tell and be a part of. I think that
I love that.
So important, especially when you're starting out, because when you're starting out, if you're like me, I just wanted to work. I just wanted to work. It didn't matter what it was. I was just hungry to do it. And sometimes I'd take jobs because it was available and it was going to pay me. and this is way before 2020, and when people were more color conscious and colorblind casting, which is just, let's just fill people of color in roles randomly, usually not the usually supporting ones. And I accepted those things, and they were fruitful experiences, but none of them, like Topdog, Underdog, which I just did, I felt like was of service to my community. I didn't feel like it was of service to my people. I didn't feel like it was a service to my family. I didn't feel like I was doing doing public service at all in any type of way other than just entertainment. And for me, I have gotten to a point in my career that I've understood the why that I'm doing this. And so, long story short, figure out what kind of stories you want to tell and why you want to be an actor. I think is really good.
Yeah. I mean, so then, Ro, can I ask you, why do you want to be an actor? Like, why is this like your career that you have chosen?
It's because, I want to be of service to the art form, in any way that I can, and I remember when I was younger, like I used to look up to, I always tell people, I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be famous. Like, I want to be like Jeffrey Wright and Don Cheadle. Like,
but
it's because of their work.
Storytelling.
It's storytelling. It ain't because they pretty and all this other stuff. It's because every time you see them, you're like, oh, they're doing something extraordinary, something unique. And it's because, they didn't conform, they stayed private, and they make it about the craft, And so why do I do it? I do it because I want to be of service to the art form in any way that I can. And if that's teaching, that's great. If that's mentoring, that's great. If that is being an assistant director or director of production, that is great. And, preferably if it's being an actor, thank you. Because all of that is continuing to give life to this art form that has nurtured me and saved me in so many ways. Like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do before this. Didn't have a trajectory. And so I think that it's only, I think it's the respectful thing to do, to be of service to the art form and how it's been of service to me. So that's why I do it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we have some students, who definitely desire to be actors and professional actors, just like you. And I think, they, hear the journey about going to college for it, but then they, then there's the graduation. Can you talk a little bit about, like, how did we get to, Topdog, Underdog, which we just, what you just did at Roundhouse? What was that journey like? Did you move to DC from North Carolina? Like, what did that look like for you? Or did you go to city? How was that for you, that journey?
I did, actually. My first job was in DC post-graduation. Because it was at Forum Theater. Jeremy Skidmore, who is also a director from NCSA, he directed that. So, and this is, I should also tell, this is also great advice that I give everyone, is be kind and be generous to everyone. Show them that respect, because you never know when someone's going to call you, and be genuine with it. But be kind, because I have had doors open up because of my talent, but also because of how I talked to people who had clout without wanting anything from them, only that I was really, really curious about them. And so we had a showcase after senior year of college, and I was lucky enough to get an agent through that.
Oh, great. Okay.
I graduated with representation, and which was great. But I also, my fourth year, I did a play with Jeremy Skidmore because he was a guest director. And so he hired me before I graduated college to be in America. And so, And
was it Angels? You said Angels in America was the show?
Part 1 and part 2. So I played Bailey's, and and it was fantastic. I got to, I still had my academic brain, but then I came my first professional job with Jennifer Mendenhall and Carl Miller and people who were just well established here in the community. And I got to work with them as professionals, but I still kept it academic and about the work, and it served me, I feel like, through that whole process. And so that was my first gig. And then it was moving to New York City, because that was always the trajectory. And so I moved to New York and immediately started doing regional theater gigs. My first one after Angels was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom at Baltimore Center Stage, and Irene Lewis directed, and Butler was in it. And then after that, I just started bouncing around the country, And as someone who I respect, who I actually haven't met, but I listen to all of his podcasts because I just think he's the dopest guy. Is Ruben Santiago Hudson. And
Ruben, listen in. We like your work.
Yes, please let us in.
Ditto.
He just says great things. And one thing that he said in one podcast is, when you're starting out, do as much regional theater as you can, because it builds up your armor and sets you up for all the no's.
I love that.
When you go to New York City, it builds you up with confidence, so you can walk in a room knowing that you have had so many successes at all these other places, and that you have a right to stand in that space, So that's what I did. I did a lot of regional theater, and a lot of the jobs that I've had and gotten, sometimes have been through my agents, and sometimes it's been through people that I've worked with who I've made a good impression on. And that has led to other opportunities. So it's a long trajectory. I don't know how to get all the way to top.
No, it's super.
It started in DC.
But it's super helpful. And it's super helpful because it knowing your journey, it demystifies the process for young people. There's this thing of it's unreachable. I can't do this. And so it's always useful. Everyone's journey is different, but it's also really useful to hear everyone's journey, to be frank. And what I hear as a theme in yours that I think is really important is that there's a lot of the opportunities that you're receiving do have auditions, but a lot of it also attests to your character and to how you made people feel in the room, and how of your kindness, and how you've served others, and that really, has also brought you that opportunity. I will 100% piggyback you on that, and saying that my first equity job was from a professor, a college production of The Piano Lesson at University of Maryland, directed by Jennifer Nelson. Nelson did it at the Hangar, and she called me to be her grace. And that is how that happened, so and there was no audition, it was hey, I remember how you did in this show. Can you please come and be a part of this creative process? So I think that the theme that you're sharing about this, the character, the way you are in a room, the way you make people feel, your kindness, the way you serve others is as important as the talent that you bring into the space. It's as important. And there's some kind of theme in that too about authenticity, and not performing, right? But just being yourself. So all good stuff. This is great. I hope all of y'all out here are listening to all of this good information for sure. So I want to jump into, you can choose the show. I've actually seen I've seen Ro in a lot of shows this past year. I just realized I saw you in Radio Golf too. I've seen a lot of things. Yes. So you get to pick the show. Okay. But in the last year, we have to say this. Everyone listening, all of Ro's shows were important. All of them Ro enjoyed. They were all amazing. But Ro, is there a specific role this year that you played that you feel like fed your soul, fed your heart, fed your purpose? I'd love to know what role that is. And then I just want to dive into why and what was your process of creating the character. So which show are we diving into?
All right. It's hard to pick. It would be between the Mountaintop and Topdog. But I think I might go with the most recent one because it's the most fresh, in my bones. And so Topdog, Underdog took me to another level. And that's what you hope for, and that's not just, there's a lot of factors that help with that. It's where you are mentally, where you are physically, and also the people that you are surrounded with and collaborating with. And I couldn't have asked for a better group of people to do this play with. I've been wanting to do the play since I was in high school. And Bill Jude as a director, and my boy, who is my brother now, Yao Dogbe as my younger brother. I mean, it's a hard piece for people who don't know it. Mm-hmm. You have two brothers who come from unspeakable circumstances. They were abandoned at a young age, and they had to figure out how to survive on their own in the world. And the older brother, went about hustling with a game called 3-Card Monte, and he was very successful at it. But then he did it one day, and his boy got shot, and he swore off the cards. And his younger brother, who I think in the script he's like 5 years younger than he is trying to, from the start of the play, get his older brother to get back into it. But there's so much grief still hanging on, and so much regret still hanging on Lincoln that he doesn't want to go back to it. But anyway, both characters are almost at their wits' end. With their circumstances, with each other, because they're living in a small room together. The whole play takes place in his younger brother, Lincoln's younger brother's apartment. And basically the end of the play I guess the statement at the end of the play is, are you willing to, are you willing to do unspeakable acts to be the top dog? I guess.
Do anything. Yeah.
And they both do. And it does not end well. But with all of that, we brought so much love to the play. We brought, because it's so easy to do this production from the top, because on the lines, they're just like, no, you did this. No, you did. They're attacking each other. But if you have siblings, if you have cousins, there's a cost to when you get angry to someone that you love. It costs you something. But there's also, like, it's not like you're yelling at somebody out on the street. You know what I mean? Like, there's a banter, a back and forth. Yeah, you take it personally, but you also let it roll off your shoulder because you just doing that thing you do. You know what I mean? And so we brought brotherly love to the whole thing that made it seem like the fighting was, not casual and arbitrary, but like it's just something we do as a way of communicating.
Yeah, this is how I talk to you.
Yeah. And it was dope to imbue it with all of that love. And I always tell my students, and I think I've done it maybe with Dr. King, but I always say you have to love the character you play more than anybody else, because their livelihood depends on your love. Like, you can't judge them. You can't critique them. You are there to justify their existence because you're existing for them. And I was heartbroken. I'm not afraid to say it. I cried a little bit at closing because I love that man so much. And they're both so hard. But capitalism, the way the system is rigged together, like so many things are out of their control to exist as Black men. And so it meant a lot for me as a Black man to tell that story. I was telling it for cousins of mine. I was telling it for people in DC, and I was telling it to people who don't look like me, who needed to see that, Black stories aren't always the Cosbys or, but like, this is reality. And this is something that might be happening down in Southeast. You just don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So respect people's struggles when you pass by them on the street, because you just never know. And so yeah, anyways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this makes me think about your process a little bit. So if I can put a
Yeah.
couple things together, I'm assuming script is very important. So you probably started in the script. We could talk about that. But then you mentioned card playing. So I feel like that had to be a part of the process too.
Yep.
So talk to us a little bit about how did you create your character? Who did you play in the show?
I played Lincoln, who was the older brother, and he was the experience. He was the top dog. He's the top dog all the way up until like the last 5 seconds of the play, 5 seconds. You know, but he was dope. He was the best 3-card Monte player. So I knew I had to be the best. So whenever I look at it, and what's the luxury if you stay in DC and you decide to be an actor in DC, one of the luxuries about that is that they cast a year in advance in DC for most theaters here. And so, a year or like, at least
I like that.
No more than 6 or 7 months, when something is coming up. So I take that to my advantage and I'm like, okay, I know I have this play coming up, this past spring. I called my boy, who was a magician consultant on The Tempest. And
cool. Yes. Yeah, cool.
Hey, you mind meeting up with me like a month before Topdog, Underdog and like showing me some 3-card Monte? Because on the first day of rehearsal, I don't want to be thinking about that. I don't want to be thinking about this very technical thing. And so I think it's so important before you go into any rehearsal process is to look at all the things you do not understand and try to figure it out before you come in. Like, do your dramaturgy work. If there's words, if there's skills you need to develop, just get that out of the way because you want to be able to live, not be focusing on how you're going to juggle, or whatever that thing is, And so I met with him in Adams Morgan at Trist. And we just spent an hour just going over that. And so when I came to the first read, I knew most of my lines and I knew how to do that, so.
Wow.
Yeah. So I try to know my lines as much as possible before the rehearsal process, not to get into like a stuck rhythm with it because it's so easy to do that, but to know it well enough to be able to lift my head off the page to connect.
Yeah.
I think that's important. What else?
Well, I have a quick question. About your process because Topdog, correct me if I'm wrong. Topdog and Topdog Underdog is the two of you. That's it, right?
Yeah.
90 minutes?
Yeah. It's true.
90 minutes, right?
2 hours and 40 minutes.
In 40 minutes?
Yes.
Let's talk about scene work. Okay. Let's talk about is there water on the stage? No, I'm being facetious, but I'm saying, I mean, is it, I'm assuming, how are we, so we have an individual prep, right? But how are you able to, because I also saw that you're like a professional consultant on presence, right? And being present. So what are you doing on stage to be present with one other actor for 2 hours and 40 minutes? How are you holding the space like that?
I am making sure that I am listening above all. Like because, and also in rehearsal, I just make sure that I know where my anchors are. This is something I got from Jason Alexander in the scenes of where my body needs to be at certain positions, at certain times in the script. And the repetition of those 3 weeks of rehearsal of doing that with the lines, like it becomes like a dance and you build a stamina with it. I've been fortunate enough to do 2 one-man shows. And so I know what that is like to pace yourself, but it's making sure that you put it all on the other person, and and that's what sustains me, and, working with Yao, who every single day would just give me so much to play with, something to play with, because there's a rhythm, just like August Wilson and just like Shakespeare, to the language of Susan Bohart's play. And once we had gotten into our bodies for 2 hours and 40 minutes, we would switch the rhythm up, we would something else with this. We would lift this word, and the other person would be like, no, you didn't say that to me like that. Like it was we act differently, and so it just keeps you in the moment if you don't anticipate where you're supposed to be going. You know what I mean? For those who don't know, like Lincoln gets shot at the end, you know what I mean? And the playwright sets that up, at the beginning of the play, so you know where it's going. But I, the character, have to keep hope alive that
you do.
That any given moment, my luck is going to change. And so that keeps me alive and in the moment, because I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure out how to make my life work. I'm trying to figure out how to coexist with my brother, and that just keeps me up and keeps me alive, And then there's the whole thing about use the bathroom before you,
that's important.
That's important. Don't have too much caffeine so you crash. And don't eat too much so you don't start the play off like you want to go to bed.
All of these are such wonderful practical tips for the listeners out here. And also I love it because I'm going to just say this, they're going to be able to see you in the DC metro area because, you have a wonderful career, at least in my opinion, in this town. So I'm excited about that. I mean, Ro, the Topdog Underdog, I love the show, and 100% sure that our students, if you're listening out there, it's a great read. So going out and get the play and read it if you haven't read it at school, if it's not a part of your school's curriculum. It's a great read for you all to know and a show for you to know exists. Now, this portion of the interview, we usually shift a little bit and we go into some advice. So I think you're going to be great at this because you're a professor, you work with young students. So just in general, students who want to go into a career for performing arts, Ro, who want to be able to have a Topdog Underdog experience. You shared with us already that students should be thinking about what kind of stories they want to tell and what worlds they want to help build. I think that's a really big one. Is there anything that you would give advice to that has to do with the student who wants to be an actor, but they're really hesitant about it simply because it doesn't seem safe, or it doesn't seem like it's a quote unquote smart decision? What is there? A bravery? Is there a courage? What is it that you would share with that young person?
Yeah, there are those things, you do have to be brave. You'll develop a thick skin the longer that you do it. And I'm a firm believer in training, so figure out where you want to go. There are perks, there are pros and cons to both the liberal arts and the conservatory. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I wanted to do this. And so going to a place that was going to enrich my art form and, also give me academic courses was just what I preferred, and at that time it was very actor heavy. It's changed a lot now since 2009. You take directing classes and you take playwriting classes. So you can leave being a multi-hyphenated artist, which I also think is incredibly important, when work there, self-generate your own work, or if the work is there and you don't like it, self-generate your own work, And then there's pros to liberal arts college where, maybe you want to minor in the thing, still get the degree in the thing, but, there are other things that pique your interest as well. But regardless, I think training is important. And then after you graduate, I still take classes. I don't know.
Amazing.
I don't know a celebrity that doesn't have a coach, Continue, because you can get stuck in patterns. You can get stuck in your way of doing things, and having an outside eye there to call you out, chip at your ego a little bit and say, hey, you're relying on something cute or something like that.
Yeah.
Playing the truth of a moment can change your performance. So I think education in the craft is really, really important. But you don't necessarily have to. But that is what I would recommend. And other advice, if you get representation, if you're lucky enough to get an agent or manager, treat it as if you don't, because it's a partnership. It's so easy to get get an agent, a manager, and say, okay, go get me these jobs.
Yeah.
You know? But it's a partnership. You have to work twice as hard because they're still trying to figure out what your type is, and they won't know what your type is unless you tell them or say no to projects.
Oh, that's good.
Don't say no to things, because if you say yes to everything and you're saying yes to something just because you want to check, they might think they can send you out for anything. You know?
Yeah. Oh, that's wise, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's facts. What else?
Well, I have one with when you talked about being multi-hyphenate. How do you live in the multi-hyphenate space? What are the other things? Are you creating some new work now? Are you a writer? What do you like to do?
I play music. Music.
Oh, cool.
I play guitar, and
wow.
But I guess my multi-hyphenate, like I'm such a and my mentor is Michelle Shea, who introduced me to chakra work, with acting, which is a whole nother thing that, we'd be here for a while talking about it, but it's something that I use
next episode.
Yeah, it's something I use in my process. But it kind of took me down a road of a lot of spiritualism. And so like that's one of my hyphens, is that I'm a Reiki master. So I try to bring that work into acting work, because I do think that what we do is healing, is transformative, not just for artists, even if you're not an artist. I feel like it can really change your life to just learn to be more empathetic, like more empathy in the world. And so I try to multi-hyphenate myself in ways that will allow me to be more of a healer. But artistically, I'm trying to get the courage to be a writer. I know you just have to just do it. So I have a couple of residencies that me and my board are looking at, and we're just going to give it a shot. And so hopefully I'll be able to say playwright soon.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's awesome. That's very, very cool. Yes, tell the stories. Tell all the stories. I'm biased because I'm a dramaturg, and that's what we do. Help playwrights tell stories. So, I mean, it has been really an honor to have you here today, Ro. And I know that all of our listeners out here are inspired by what they heard. Everyone, I hope you are taking notes. Like I always say, if not, play it back and take some notes, because Ro has shared a whole lot for you all that's going to be really, really useful, especially those of you that are really aspiring to be actors. Things that I've taken from this conversation today is be kind to everyone. Serve those people around you. Your character may also get you the role. And then also just remember, everyone, that craft is so important. Your talent will take you far, but craft will keep you going. And so, Ro, thank you so much, everyone. I'm glad you've been out here for listening once again to Teens Behind the Scenes Webinar Series, and we'll see you again on another episode. Bye, everybody.